I'm making a mask with ties. I've already cut out the 3 pieces that I need. This is going to be the front of the mask. This is going to be the back of the mask. And then I have my interfacing. And you can see my interfacing is pretty thick because it comes in different thicknesses. It kind of feels like a coffee filter, only a little bit heavier. And that's going to go in the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the front piece facing up. The inside piece, if it had a front and back, it would be the front to the front, and then the interfacing on top of it. And then you're going to either pin it, or what I like is these little clips because they're easier to get off. Also, you want to make sure that if you have an up or a down, I just want my leaves going this direction so I know which is the top of the mask. So I have it all put together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew across the top of it. And your seam is going to be about 1/8 of an inch, which of course your 1/8 of an inch is, usually it shows on your machine, it's just the width of your needle guide. Always make sure that you lock your stitch. Once you start, you're going to go reverse to lock it. And again, when you get to the end, reverse it to lock it. Get rid of the extra. So now what we're going to do is we're going to iron this. We're going to iron it so that the seam lays down, and you're going to iron it so the back and the front. And it doesn't matter which way the seam goes. It doesn't matter if it goes towards the front or towards the back. You're probably going to have to edit this because there's going to be lulls in between. Okay, now we can. Once you've ironed the seam on the inside, then you're going to fold it over and iron on the outside of the seam so that it lays nice and flat for you. Because the next thing we're going to do is put the nose piece in. So my nose pieces, what I have is I bought this on Amazon, and it's little metal pieces. They are about 3 1/4 inches in length. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure this up so that it's halfway in between. So I've got 2 1/4 over here and almost 2 1/4 here. Just going to move it a little bit. Okay. Again, you either use a pin or a clip. to measure where it is you're going to sew. And you're going to take that away. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sew a piece that's going to hold the nose piece. So I'm going to start here. And I'm going to sew down and back to lock it. And then what you do is you lift up your foot so that you can just turn it. Make sure your needle stays in your fabric so you don't lose that. And then I'm going to sew across. This is where the nose piece is going to go. Again, I'm going to lock it. Now what you do is you open this up and you see how it's sewn across here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slip this right in here. And it just slides right into that pocket. And there I just push it all the way down and I've got my nose piece in here. Now I just have to close up the other end. Make sure you don't sew over the metal. You could break your needle. I'm going to go back over a little bit of where I've already sewed, lock it, and we're done with the nose piece. Okay, so now we're going to turn it inside out again, the same way that it was. You want to make sure that it's nice and even because we're going to sew the bottom. So I'm going to put a few clips on here just to make sure that it's all even. And then the other side. All right, I'm just going to sew across the bottom. I like to sew on the interfacing side only because the material that I use on the outside is pretty thin cotton, and for some reason it kind of puckers when I sew on that side. So I sew on the interfacing side. Again, we're going to have this small seam of only about 1/8 of an inch. And again, you want to lock your stitch. One of the things that you need to do too when you're cutting your material out is with the interfacing, it doesn't matter because it's not a woven material. You can cut it with any scissors. But when you're cutting out woven material, whether it's 100% cotton or if it's 65-35, whatever it is, you want to use pinking shears because otherwise you're gonna have unravel on you. You're going to have a lot of pieces getting in your way. So I turned this inside right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm going to just kind of pull down on the seam to just try and bring it all the way out. And then we're going to go back over to the iron. We're going to iron this seam out. Okay. So now we're ready to put the darts in. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim this up a little bit on the side here, just to kind of make it all the materials even. So I find the easiest way to do this is to just grab a hold on both sides, come down about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. It doesn't really, you don't have to be real precise on this, but just make a fold, put a pin or a clip in on both sides. And we're going to do 3 of these. That's actually up kind of high. I'm going to redo this. And just kind of eyeball it. When I first started doing these, I was very precise. I even made marks on the material to make sure that I had them all the same. And it just became a real hassle. And then I started doing it this way, and it's a whole lot easier. The background noise is Louie, my bird. He's trying to get rid of us. So then turn it over and just kind of eyeball them. And you can see whether or not you've got them even, and then you can adjust them accordingly. This way you can see how your pleats look in the back, and you can see they look pretty even. And then I measure, and this is 2 3/4 on this side and 2 3/4 on this side. So I know that my pleats are even. So the next step is to sew these pleats down. Again, we're going to try and make the smallest seam possible because we're going to put the ties over this. Make sure you lock your stitches. All right, so here we are. Just going to trim up this thread a little bit. And now we're ready to put the ties on. So because most people's heads are bigger than their necks are, what I do is I usually by the way, these are 36 inches long. And when you buy the bias tape, if you cut it in thirds, you'll have 36 inches. So you're able to make 1.5 masks from each bias tape package.
Wait.
So the bias tape that you want to buy is a 1/2 inch wide, and it's a single fold. So what that means is this is the width, but then when you open it up like this, it's folded, and it's already has folds down on itself. But you're going to open this up, and you're going to put this on the end of your mask, just like that. And like I said, I like to make it a little bit longer at the top because everybody's head is a little bit bigger than their neck. And that's going to go right over that stitching. Make sure that it fits down real nice and tight. Pin it or clip it. Where's my other one? And we're ready to sew. I like to sew it so that the opening is going to my left. I just feel like I have better control with it there.
On the inside.
Yep. So bias tape, I find always when it's folded, there's always going to be a shorter side. I think you can see that. See how when it overlaps, there's a little bit of a difference between one side and the other. I think what I do is I sew it on the side that's a little shorter. That way I can see and make sure that I'm getting my stitching into both sides. Now, bias tape is pretty stiff. I always wash my material before I sew it, but the bias tape I don't. So you're going to see when I sew this that the bias tape is pretty thick, and my machine, I don't have a real fancy machine, so sometimes it has a hard time going through the tape. But once I get going, it seems like the faster I go, the easier it goes. So I'm going to start out, and again, I'm going to lock my stitch, and I'm going to make that as close as I can to the edge, making sure that I've got both sides of the bias tape. Make sure you push that bias tape down real good onto the mask. Okay, and check to be sure that it went all the way on both sides. And now I'm going to do the other side. Okay. Not always real straight, but I did use thread that's the same color as the bias tape. So you just want to make sure that it was close enough so that your bias tape, the inside fold doesn't open up. That looks good. You want to try and get that tie on the top up pretty high so it stays up. Ponytails help. And that bottom one, you can see Melissa's putting that over her ponytail. Most people put it around their neck, but anywhere it will stay is good. And then she's molding it to her nose. Okay, so I'm gonna sew a mask with elastic instead of the ties. And what I've done is I've already put in the nose clip. It's this, or the nose piece. It's exactly the same up to that point. So now, instead of sewing the bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the sides and the bottom line up again. But I'm going to put a piece of elastic. Now I do have pre-made elastic that I bought from Amazon, and I'll show you those pieces. On this particular one, these are the pieces. They're already cut, and they have a little silicone piece that's adjustable. But my son isn't real crazy about these. He likes the regular elastic. It's a little bit wider, so I'm going to use the regular elastic instead. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the elastic between the front and the back. I know it's hard to see because this is all black, but I'm going to clip this right up at the seam between the front and the back with it turned inside out. I'm going to clip that there. Then I'm going to bring it down, make sure that you don't twist it. And I'm going to put it right down near the end, not at the end, because remember you're going to have a seam there. So you want to bring it up just a little bit, and I'm going to clip it there. Then I'm going to pull the top over, and I will clip them all together. I actually think that these are more difficult to make than the ones with the ties because of this elastic. I'm going to put another piece in the middle. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. So I'm going to put the elastic way up here at the top, right up at the seam line. And I'm going to put a clip there. Then I'm going to bring this elastic, again, making sure that I'm not twisting it. And I'm going to attach it right down here. And then I bring the top over. Okay, now let's make sure that the bottom is even. Looks like that's okay, I'm just adjusting. Sometimes you have to kind of play with it to make sure that your material lines up. Okay. I'm also going to make sure that the bottom lines up, because when I sew this, I am going to sew it around the sides and part way across the bottom. I'm just going to leave it so I can turn this inside out. Okay. So we're ready to sew. Also, on the elastic, I go back over it a couple of times too to make sure that it's sewed in there real well. Make sure when you're sewing that the elastic doesn't get caught up, especially if you have a piece of elastic that's tight, that's smaller. So now I'm going to turn this and I'm going to go across the bottom part way. Okay, that's one side. I'm going to do the other side. Cut all my threads. Okay, so now we're going to turn it inside right. But one of the things I like to do is to kind of clip the corners a little bit here with my pinking shears, just so we don't have so much material. And kind of work the corners and the edges with your fingers just to bring everything out along the seam line. Make sure I didn't twist my elastic. Okay, there we are. So what we're left with is this little opening down here where I didn't sew, and that's what's going to be. We're going to sew that up once I press it. Okay, we're going back to the iron. When I press it, are we on? Mm-hmm. I'm going to press this piece down to where I will sew it. Okay. All right. So now we're back to making the darts. Feels like I have a little wrinkle in here. Just pull it down. Okay, so again, we're going to grab a hold, both sides. This mask is a little bit bigger.
For his big fat head.
Because it's for my son and he has a bigger face. Yeah. I wish my hand spread was just a tad longer with making these. I can already tell I'm a little bit uneven here, so I'm just going to adjust it. I usually find my first dart, the highest one, is the biggest one. And I always figure it's good to have it there because that's where your nose is, and that's the biggest part that sticks out of your face. So now I'm going to measure. It's 3 inches on that side, and I'm a little short on this side, so I'm going to adjust this a little bit. That's better. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all the way around the whole mask. And that's going to encompass not only the darts, but also this piece down here that isn't sewn. So it's just easier to sew all the way around. And I'll just follow the line here where the nose piece is, and we'll do it all the way around. And you're going to sew, you want to sew as close as you can to the edge. Again, when you get to the corner and you're going to turn, make sure your needle is down in place. Now, this is going to be really thick. So sometimes you have to coax it a little bit. And I'm going to stay with this line, so I'm not going to go up quite so far on the top because I'm going to make that line even across. Okay, and there you've got one with elastic, which is a little bit big for me, but I think it'll be fine for my son. Okay.
Huh? Hi, Shotzi. Say hi. Shatsy's not a talker.